Australian women speakers and my weekly live stream show. This show is all about really trying to show you the amazing array of women that there are out there that can speak on stages in order to change the stats from 30% speakers to 50%. And the other stat that I've just discovered, which is only 15% of panels have women on them, which I think we kind of all know anecdotally, but it just annoys me. Okay, so I want to introduce my wonderful guest today, Kirstin Bouse. Did I say it right, Kirstin?
You did. I'm impressed.
Okay, so this is all about you. Tell us about the topic that you like to talk about and why.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, I mean, I love talking about a lot of things, to be honest.
I'm with you.
And they've changed over my career, of course, as kind of I've followed my own interests. But certainly for the last little while, I've been really, really, just deep diving and wanting to speak about and educate and support women through the menopausal transition.
Right.
And I guess, like, for many people, their why comes from a personal experience.
Yes.
I've been a clinical psych for about 28 years now.
And oh my God, you don't look old enough to have been doing that for 28 years.
I am. Well, when you kind of go straight from school to uni and all the rest,
gotcha.
you can kind of. I'm 50, so yay for me.
Oh yeah, I'm 58 now.
Yes,
yay for me. I'm at the other end.
That's very, very cool. But yeah, it. To be honest, though, having said the why is often a personal kind of experience, this is the first time in my career that my career focus has been from a personal experience.
Okay.
That's, I did work in the perinatal space and I do have children, so I've certainly experienced that. But for me,
what happened that made you decide, right, that's it, I'm shifting my focus?
Well, I had been working in the perinatal space, for some time, and was finding with women having children a bit later, they were kind of coming up against perimenopause at the same time.
Think of that.
Yeah, no, don't think about it, because it's a pretty stressful experience being postpartum and also perimenopausal. Like,
oh
blows
my
God,
mind. It's bad enough as it is.
Yeah. I know, right? So I'd certainly been learning and working with perimenopausal women, but within that context. And then I had a hysterectomy at about 42, to solve just, dramas with periods and stuff like that, endometriosis, had more my kids, was very much done and dusted. And nobody told me that you actually are highly likely to enter perimenopause very soon after that surgery. So you keep your ovaries, so you don't go straight into menopause, but you go into perimenopause. And I would say it was probably within 6 months of that surgery that I, in hindsight, began perimenopause.
So what were the symptoms that made you think something's wrong?
Well, initially it would have probably been kind of, a lower mood and irritability and stuff like that. Definitely didn't spot that. But I'm going to talk about one of the things that people don't talk about now, and that was the vaginal problems.
Oh my God, my father was a gynecologist and obstetrician.
You're very used to that word. And so for me, that was something that I was in pain and uncomfortable during the day, like just kind of walking around the world.
Right.
Now, it coincided with my marriage ending and, finding a new partner at some point down the track. And so, to be blunt, I feel like a bit like Halle Berry. I don't know if you've heard her story, but I kept getting sent off for STD checks because of the problem I was having, and I was in a new relationship.
And you were too young as far as they were concerned.
Absolutely.
Didn't clock that you'd had the hysterectomy.
No, my GP knew and the gynecologist knew. So I spoke to both of them.
My dad was too, and I'm like, you've never been, you sit there and advise us, but actually you've never experienced it.
Both of them sent me for the same STD checks multiple times, just convinced.
God,
and I just threw my hands in the air and thought, oh, well, I'm just going to have to suck it up, right? So I kind of lived with that discomfort most days for a couple of years.
Right.
And then, in amongst all that, and again, it was kind of the mood and the irritability and poor sleep. It was in this context of not having thought my marriage would end, and it did.
Yes.
And navigating, late primary, early high school, mid high school, well, late high school, actually, kids through it because, I've got a few kids, and they were having some challenges. So, I do appreciate that when I was talking to these doctors, that's what they were also very aware of, right? Yeah. But for me, that particular symptom of, kind of having a sore vagina is pretty distinct, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I remember a couple of years down the track, so quite a while, kind of whinging to my kids and saying, oh, God, I'm so sick of not being able to sleep. I'm sick of waking at 3 o'clock in the morning and just always being tired. And
I think that's the worst symptom, worse than hot flushes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said to them, God, I just sound like Nan when she was my age. And that was my light bulb moment. Yeah. Because my mum was a nurse, and she's 81 now. I know that generation didn't talk about it anywhere near as much as our generation.
Yeah.
But as a nurse, she was always very matter of fact about a lot of things. And so my dad and my sister and I knew when she was navigating the change.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when I made that statement, it was like, oh my God, I think that's what it is. Menopause. So
and the other thing I think is that our parents were even though they were the same age, they were at a very different stage of life at that time. Yeah. So you don't identify necessarily going, well, my mum started to look old then, as opposed to us who kind of look young.
I know you have short hair and it looks fabulous, but my mum had this rule that when you're 40, you have to have short hair.
Yeah, I remember that.
that kind of rule. Yeah.
And I always had short hair when I was younger as well. And went, oh my God, does this mean I'm old?
Yeah, I have revisited that conversation with her, and she's like, no, I love your hair long. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Too bad if you didn't. But anyway, so that really sent me on a journey to dive even deeper into, I had, as I said, I'd been working in the space for a little while, and it was what I hadn't come across though necessarily, or realized in my head that yes, I was having women in their 40s having babies and toddlers and things and coming up against perimenopause. But somehow in my head, I didn't put myself into that as that possibility, into that mix. And so I learned a heck of a lot about it, and really realized what was going on for me. That GP of mine is wonderful in so many ways, and I still see her, but I did manage to stumble across a really great menopause informed GP and kind of got myself started on kind of MHT, because that was the decision that I wanted to make. And even that was a bit of a rock show. I haven't been an easy person to find the right combination for, and that's another story for another time. But in amongst, kind of learning about this, I actually really was also finding what I think, and this is what I love talking about, is I was really finding that yes, my marriage had ended, but all the other parts of my life, I had loved my career. I was a group psychology practice owner. Early in my career, I'm also a forensic psych. So I was doing, I worked in that space, and then I trained and mentored younger psychs in that space. I had 18 kind of staff in my team, loved all of that kind of jam. But I was starting to not love it. And that was very, very confusing for me.
Right.
And I was starting to think, who am I? I didn't feel like myself. I was also finding my temper was pretty quick to show, which is definitely not me. And I've been lucky with my cycle. I've been relatively even keeled. And all the rest, but that was starting to change. And in amongst all that, all my boys got diagnosed as ADHD, and I also got a late diagnosis of ADHD. So there was a lot of change for me on a really deep personal level. And I wanted someone to talk about it with. Yes, I've got great friends, and I certainly spoke about it with them, but I couldn't find a psych who actually understood this upheaval.
Okay.
And I've tried really, really hard. And I also wanted to find kind of a naturopath as well, because there were things that MHT for various reasons kind of weren't helping with and stuff. Again, really, really hard. And so for me,
how long ago was this, Kirstin?
well, I'm 50 now, and so probably by 45, I really kind of knew what was going
Because
on.
I have to say that if you went looking now, you
Oh,
would probably find quite a few, because it's really kind of become a point of discussion.
yeah.
And of course, for any corporates that are watching, they
Yeah.
are all talking about it now. So hopefully you'll get some tips with them.
Absolutely. It's definitely having its time in the sun. But what started to percolate for me was this very strong, I've got to change this. This is too hard. I'm a persistent, educated, resourced woman, particularly in the health arena.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, not just in Perth where I live, but I've got connections, and I cannot find the right people. So I went on a really big mission to find them. And my first thought was, I'm going to create a platform so that women can find the full spectrum of health practitioners who specialize in menopause.
Right.
So that was the first task, though, because I had to find the service providers.
Yeah.
As I spoke to service providers, what I found is they were really crying out for education, training, collaboration, support community. They were all navigating it themselves personally as well. So there was a lot of that going on. And I really realized, okay, I can create something that supports the health practitioners and also the community of women who are navigating this stage. And that's kind of how All About Her came about. And part of All About Her is really to communicate and educate as widely as possible. I love speaking. I've been a court expert early in my career.
I was going to say, where did you get your speaking experience from? Court. That's the first time I've heard that one.
Yeah. Well, probably. Let's just say I grew up in the Salvation Army, so I don't go anymore. But that's a very lively church. I did a lot of performing in that environment. I did a lot of drama and theatre and performing in high school.
So getting on the stage wasn't going to be a problem for you.
No. And therefore a lot of my career has been in the education and training space, lecturing, seminars, webinars, workshops, the whole shebang. And so for me, it was just so natural to be now using all of those skills. And I love it. I really do. People are like, you got rocks in your head, public speaking. I'm like, no, I love it. I've done a lot of media here in Perth. I've done a lot of media with Channel 9, radio and things. So it's very much my natural place to be.
Right.
And I know it's a fantastic platform to be talking about this really important experience. And I guess for me, there's all the kind of physical symptoms, all the symptoms that kind of come with menopause. But one of the things I'm really passionate about talking about is what I now know is the psychological shifts that occur for women during this transition. And I'm not just talking mental health, although that is very, very relevant because we can definitely take some hits there. But also, the conversation about how much we change internally. And often women really resist it. And that's because it's hard and it's scary. And often we don't know what we're changing into as well. So who wants to let go of who we are? We don't know who we're going to become.
Yeah.
But it's really, don't get me wrong, I truly understand the challenges of perimenopause and just how much women can suffer. But when we can support them out of the suffering, then there's this huge opportunity for them to be able to really work out how they want to live their lives in this second part of their lives.
And it definitely is that moment, isn't it? I mean, you've turned 50. I know when I turned 50, it was just after that I started She's the Boss. So
yes,
again, it's because, I don't know, I always describe it as like a switch went off and I went, I don't care anymore whether people like me or not. I just care that I get something done.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we want to, I've sometimes had a bit of an issue with the concept that we now move into, contributing kind of, caring for people more. I've been known to kind of say some of the developmental psychologists, who are all men and all base their theories on men, who say that when you move into midlife, you actually focus more on others. And I'm like, women have spent their entire lives focusing on others.
We can't focus more. We
I
just
know.
focus differently.
I'm like, no. Well, yeah, exactly. But
I think maybe the thing for me anyway was it went from being quite introspective in terms of what you do with your family, you're bringing up kids,
yes,
that kind of thing.
yes,
Suddenly having this perspective where you look out in the world and see the injustices,
yes.
I guess in my case, and just decide that it's time to do something.
No, absolutely. And midlife women are amazing. They
Yeah.
are absolutely amazing.
I agree.
And I love working in this space because there is so much possibility and it gets actualized so much more than in other age ranges.
Yes, very true.
And so it's really, really exciting for me. And I have a phrase that a lot of women resonate with, or a concept. And I think one of the things I see is a lot is women start to feel this kind of rumbling of change.
Yeah.
But the narrative and also the dynamics and expectations that they've been kind of living with and meeting and all the rest, and to some degree, happily so, really makes it difficult for them. Like, that's the first barrier, is guilt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, now hang on. I've just suddenly realized we're going too far into this. Let me talk a little bit more about you as a speaker, because I'm guessing what you're about to tell me is some of the takeaways that people get from your talk.
Yes,
So
they are.
let's talk a little bit more about, so we've talked about how you got into it and why you do it. What kind of audiences do you like in terms of size? I'm assuming mainly women, but maybe actually, I don't know. So do you have a preference in terms of gender and size, or what particular industry?
Not really, because I guess my speaking can range from that real, what I consider the inspirational kind of keynote speaking, and I think in those instances it's going to resonate with women. And when I think about who I'd like to support at this point in time, millennials, midlife women are my key passion.
I agree. However, as I was asking you that question, I suddenly thought about all the men that need to be educated about women. So I guess to an extent, a mixed audience is just as good as a woman's audience, just a slightly different tack.
Absolutely. And I think, definitely I have spoken, I've done speaking events with men and women, and they do take more of the educational kind of component. And sure, it can be everything from Menopause 101 through to, as I said, the kind of psychological experience, because I do think, like, I know that the changes within my psyche have had impacts on my kids, and they've had impacts
as
on
you're
my
saying that,
partner.
I'm thinking someone needs to start doing a talk about how to live with a menopausal partner or mother.
Absolutely. I've got some good stories about my kids being like, "Whoa, Mum, haven't
where did that come from?"
Yeah, exactly. But because I think what happens, and this is what I was mentioning kind of before, is we start to actually want to actualize our own potential more. We've spent a lot of time putting time and energy into helping others actualize their potential, our kids, our partners, and that's not to. I don't want to be a martyr.
No, ourselves.
We all,
ours has been spasmodic.
Yeah. And so this is a time where we really want to, what's important to me and how can I communicate it to a broader audience? And so for me, that's a really important message that I love to share in my speaking. And there's neuroscience behind it, there's psychological theory behind it, and these things aren't being spoken about.
And what about the size of the audience, Kirstin? I mean, do you like 20 women, or would you rather be in a room with 300? Do you have a preference one way or the other?
No, I love it all, really.
Just put me on the stage.
Just put me on the stage. I mean, obviously, the smaller the number, then there's far more intimacy, and I do love that kind of Q&A experience.
Yeah, hearing the stories.
Yeah, for sure. And yes,
but I
hearing
reckon
their
I can
stories.
imagine I just think you'd be great at medical conferences as well, with lots of doctors there.
I love it.
So how do you get your gigs then? So when you started out, I guess the first one was that place that you were working with and you said, let me go and do a bit of education. But
Yeah.
how now do you get your gigs? Do you actively go out and look for them, or do you just, are you more
They
reactive?
they tend to come to me.
Okay.
I am very much the say yes, yes, work it out later kind of person.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I guess the advantage, like sometimes it's a disadvantage that Perth is small and on the other side of Australia.
Country.
Yeah, the other advantage, though, is that having been around for a long time, having been quite connected to the business community within
Right.
Perth, the small
You're
business
known.
community, media and things like that. I am known, and so, and I mean, one of my other passions is really educating my own profession too in this area, because there's a lot
Great.
they need to learn. And so, yeah, they kind of come to me, but I certainly would love more. It is something that I really, really enjoy. I've spoken at conferences and been invited to speak at conferences. So, travel for me is, I mean, I love it as well. And my kids are older, so it
Yeah.
certainly makes it far more doable for me than it might have, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Well, it's certainly a trending
Mm,
topic. So, and you
mm.
are in the directory, aren't you? I think you
Yep,
have a
I
listing.
certainly am. Yeah, yeah.
So
Yep.
anybody wants to know about menopause, Kirstin is your woman.
You.
Tell me, where I interrupted you rudely
Mm,
before,
mm, mm,
if
mm.
I was to say what are 2 key takeaways an audience would walk away with from one of your talks, what would they be?
Well, I think one key thing is that as much as it's a challenge and for women, and
Yeah,
that's where anyone needs to start helping, getting help and reaching out if it's a true challenge, it is also an opportunity. This is a time where we can really kind of work out exactly who we are. We've got so much wisdom. Who are we? What do
yeah,
we want? And create, like, it really lays the foundation for the second half of our life, both in terms of just having a lovely life as well as our mental health in the second half of our life. And so, I mean, that really is my key message. And the second thing, I guess, would be, I also want women to understand that their experience of menopause isn't just I guess, determined by them. Because I know that I see a lot of women who feel very broken, and they're trying their hardest to kind of, be the woman that they were, which perhaps
yeah.
that's kind of where we start going wrong. But nonetheless, um, but how you navigate menopause can also be about privilege. And I really, really recognize that. And therefore, our experience of it
Well,
isn't
what do
just
you mean
about.
by that? Can you just expand on that a little bit? Are you just saying in terms of the sort of socio-economic group that you're in, that there's more
Absolutely.
understanding in white collar than blue collar, for instance,
Not just more
or the other way
understanding, but
around?
we've got more access to
Yeah,
education and
and
information. We're
services.
probably financially able to access. I've spoken with GPs who have told, menopause informed GPs who tell me the tricks they tell women who are financially strapped of how to access their MHT and use it in a way that helps make it cheaper. And that's a really sad conversation to have. But
Yeah,
I guess within the privilege, what I'm saying is that we're all impacted by the context in which we live.
true.
And so, I mean, I'd love to kind of really shake up the patriarchy, because it makes it very difficult for women
Yes.
to navigate these years in the way that would actually be most helpful for us.
What would you, oh
Um,
my God, I've got to jump onto that one then. What do you reckon would make it much easier for women at this time in our lives?
well, this is where privilege comes in, choice.
Right.
And when I say choice, I'm not just talking, although it can start with financial choice. So I know lots of women who've said to me, if I could cut my hours, change my job, stop working for a period of time, I would actually be able to manage this. I've had women say, I actually could navigate and cope with the hot flushes and the poor sleep because I was able to pull back. But so that's the first thing. But then again, if we had a social structure where women in particular were cyclical beings, we've been cyclical
Yes.
all our lives, but we are expected to show up exactly the same way every single day as if we have a 24-hour cycle, which is what men have. So
Right.
we have a circadian cycle, men and women, but women also have a 28-day cycle. And, you know, if we were able to roll with those times in our lives where we've got abundant energy, then we would be able to manage
nice.
our navigate, you know, both our cycles and also this menopausal transition. If we were able to take leadership roles, still with the understanding that we have different fluctuations in our energy, different fluctuations in our cognitive capacity and our executive functioning over the course of our cycle, but also then during this period of time, and not have that be a negative thing, not have that be something that stop us, but be able to kind of roll with the great days and the not so great days.
I guess
that would break it down.
I was talking with a very good friend of mine who you may know, Mish Wright, who's
Yes.
also very, very into the menopause thing the other day. And I was saying, but how can we change things when it's a 10-year thing? Like menopause is not, you know, go through it this year and it's done. It's years and years and years and years and years. So, and good old Mish was pushing back on me a lot, but I was like, how can we change the way people work and things like that when it's such a long period?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, it is a long period of time, but it also is not the same in that period of
No, that's
time.
true.
And so I think what it's about, and I do like to have a focus of how can we support each other. So that collectivist kind of perspective. At the same time, how we support each other is that we find ways to support individual needs a little bit more. Like I run a business, and I definitely understand the impacts a business would have on me if I had to, you know, forced menopause leave and, you know, all of those kinds of factors. I really understand how challenging it would be to run a small business. But within the challenges, how can we make it as easy as possible?
Well,
What
I mean, I
support
guess
can we provide?
when we're mums with young children's, there isn't children's. There's there is an understanding, I think, now that it's actually more important if your child is sick or your child has some special, you know, day at school, that, and I think there's a lot of understanding about that now in the business world. So I guess why shouldn't it be applied to menopause as well? And we just go, having a bad day, I'll make it up tomorrow. But today, when your mind's like fog, or you're having hot flushes and you just feel completely out of sorts, then really you're not going to contribute much anyway.
Yeah, and how can we contribute in different ways during different phases of our life? Now, I know, I mean, we have moved a bit more to a world where it's about producing the project. And if you're someone who can get to that end result with only working 10 hours a week and somebody else takes
so
20 hours a week.
Based,
Yeah, now that's very difficult for people like me when we're doing clinical work. You know, it's kind of client after client and doctors and things and hairdressers. There are jobs that would make that kind of difficult because time is so linked to the outcome. So I haven't quite solved that. I've actually really tried to ask around the kind of the people who work in the menopause workplace policy space. How can we do this? We haven't quite solved it, but I definitely think some big changes can be made to move towards a results-based thing, or to shift the focus of, okay, your brain's not working quite so well for that, but you know what? Your brain's working well,
really
and
well to do
this
that.
particular task can cope with the fluctuations, you know, in your capacity. So creative.
Kirstin,
let's get creative. Yes.
I love what you talk about. I am sure that there will be people watching who will be interested in hopefully booking you. If someone does want to book you as a speaker or find out more about you, where would they go? What, have you got websites, and can you tell us websites?
Absolutely. So apart from your amazing website and platform, they can find me on allabouthercentre.com.au. So there's lots of just great information. By the way. Yes, thank you. Well, it's got to be all about her at this time of her life. And I'm also, I mean, I have Instagram handles. So I have All About Her Centre. I have the Midlife Psychologist with underscores between each of those words as Instagram. And I'm very much on LinkedIn as well. So people can definitely find me there. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's lovely
No
to be able to
worries.
share what you talk about because you are amazing. If you've enjoyed this episode, please come and join me every week. I'm always showcasing great women. If you need a speaker, then obviously go to womenspeakers.com.au. Go and book Kirstin or any of the other fabulous women in there. You don't have to pay a commission. You don't have to go through any barriers. You can just contact Kirstin directly and negotiate directly with her. You're also very welcome to go and post a request into the LinkedIn group or the Facebook group, both called Australian Women Speakers with that logo on it that's above us. And if you are a speaker and you want to be found, which is for me one of the biggest challenges to find women speakers, sign up to the directory because we want to get as many women speakers on there as we can. Kirstin, thank you so much for